Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and we're finally in the first full week of the OP08 meta with the new star decks for the English version of the One Piece card game. We had 3 large events this past weekend too, and now also TCG Matchmaking has their weekly power rankings. So in this video, we're going to go over just a quick overview of the events that we had here in North America. We're going to go over the power rankings, the matchup chart, as well as some example lists that are the highest winning deck lists currently on the TCG ranked ladder too. So real quick though, in case you guys are new, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. It does help a lot and I really do appreciate it. And then also, if you guys want data for any of this, you can make sure to check it out on my website, Eggman Events. And then also it's on TCG Matchmaking for their power rankings. This is kind of just like a snapshot of it, but if you guys want more details and your own filters and some other just really great tools for the data that they have, you can make sure to support them on Patreon as well. I do it. I really do appreciate what they do, and it does help me on a lot of my videos as well. So and then again, you can check out my website for all this stuff as well. I also do want to mention too that this week was a little bit light on matches because they did do a ranked ladder reset at the beginning of this month too, so it does skew the data a little bit. I'll go over my own opinions about it, but I do want to just put that up front too, in case you see something that you don't really agree with from the data and kind of my thoughts and interpretations too. So real quick too, so I did mention we did have 3 large events here in North America. We had Top Cuts events, Madison Regionals, Play TCG's Online Treasure Cup, as well as Core TCG San Diego Regionals. I made videos going over all of these already, but if you guys want any of the deck lists, they're still here on the website. And a quick kind of cursory glance at it too, if you guys just want to look at the topping leaders from this weekend in general. We did have 17 Lucci, 14 Dofi, 11 copies of Star Deck 13 Luffy, 8 Enel, 7 Bonnie, 2 Purple Luffys, 2 Namis, 1 Smoker, 1 Betty, and 1 Zoro. So a pretty good spread. We know kind of like 5 best leaders in my own mind of Lucci, Dofi, Star Deck 13 Luffy, Enel, and Bonnie. And then also the winners across the board were 1 Dofi, 1 Star Deck 13 Luffy, and also a Bonnie. So a good spread from that as well. And I also think all 5 of these leaders are moderately unique. They do kind of encompass 4 colors, right? We've got green, yellow, and blue as a kind of primaries, and then we've got Lucci with being black, and then the Monkey D. Luffy. I think Luffy's kind of like its own kind of thing. It's not really constricted to like the yellow black colors as much, based on just kind of how the gameplay works for it. But you do recognize that's 50% Gecko Moria list for people who are keeping tally for it. I still think that Rob Lucci and Star Deck Luffy are kind of different enough. They both obviously take advantage of 8-drop Moria, but they do use it in different ways, which is at least unique in that way. But it is cool to see just a good spread of leaders right now, and having that just be different leaders almost entirely too. So that's just kind of my thoughts for it. Again, if you guys want to look at the data yourselves, you can check out the website too. So we're going to jump into the power rankings themselves though. So based on OP, so their weekly power rankings in general, we did have Smoker with the 54.5% win rate, and now with the 54.1, Bonnie with 53.6, 52.5 for Luffy, 51.6 for Dofi, 51.1 for Rob Lucci, 50.7 for Star Deck 14 Luffy, and then we had Katakuri, Nami, and Luffy all around a 47, a negative win rate. So my kind of thoughts for this too, because you can look at the previous weeks and we've seen a lot more matches across the board comparatively for this one. But something I do want to just kind of mention for this one, my kind of impact, my thinking, my critical thinking for a lot of this is that, one, this is based on a higher rank. So if you are a higher in the ranked ladder, like the 1 million bounty, this is where the data is from. It's not just from Joe Schmo entering their ranked and losing with a good deck kind of thing. So this is a little bit filtered for that. But then also the 3 decks that I think are the best decks in the game right now, with Star Deck 13 Luffy, Dofi, as well as Rob Lucci, I think those are the 3 best if I had to go to 3, and then Enel and Bonnie are likely the other 2 into the top 5, because they are kind of advertised as the best decks in this format right now. There's a lot of different people of varying skill level just trying to play them in general, right? Just kind of the idea that people who want to play these decks know that they're very strong right now. Obviously Dofi, and you can tell just by their numbers, right? We had over 2,000 people on Luffy, just over 3,000 with Lucci, and just nearly 6,000 with Dofi, right? Which is more than the rest of the leaders combined, right? We did have 2,000 people on Anel, 1,600 with Bonnie, but then you see Smoker, you see Stardix or 14 Luffy, not even 1,000 with the two of those combined. So I think that just kind of, in my mind, means that these aren't clearly like the best based on their position, but more so the people who are on Smoker love Smoker. These are the players who are really good at playing with this deck. This obviously has been a leader for a while, but not relevant in the while that it's been out. I think Anel as well. Anel's been definitely looked at one of the counters for Doflamingo. So we do see at 2,000 people on that list right now. But I also know like Anel players are pretty polarizing, right? The people who play Anel like playing the deck, and there's just people who strictly do not like playing the deck too. It's kind of like Nami, who's down here in like the 500s kind of stuff. So I think that's something just to kind of critically think about, is that, yeah, Smoker has a 54.5%, but it only got one spot in this past weekend too. Meanwhile, like stuff like Anel, Bonnie, and the rest of that top 5 I mentioned, they were doing some better numbers and even winning some of these events. So that's just my thoughts into it. But I wouldn't be, I think Smoker could definitely be in top 10 from there. But I do think that even if we're at these higher rankings, people who are just exploring playing Dofi or exploring playing Sardic 13 Luffy are Rob Lucci. They are good decks, but they are kind of specific to their playstyle. And if someone's kind of jumping into it, it does have a bit of a learning curve to really get the most value for it, especially Luffy. I think Sardic 13 Luffy is very tricky. And then obviously Dofi is newer on the scene, so you kind of have to relearn the deck or learn it for the first time. So that's kind of just my interpretation for these results in general. And then looking at the win rates, again, there's not a lot of data for some of these. So we'll see something like this is way in the corner here, but like Nami had 100% win rate against Marco. You one Nami played, one Marco, and the Nami player won, right? That's kind of details for some of this in the bottom right kind of corner here. But I do think a lot of this is moderately faithful for what we're seeing in this. So we do see Doflamingo having some pretty like evening-ish matchups across the board. I definitely see that like a Nell is something that has a counter for it. You're kind of like a -1 against Rob Lucci, Black Yo Luffy, as well as Bonnie, and then you do have moderately positive across the board afterwards. So I do think it's a force to be reckoned with, and I also think that people adjusting how to play against it is something as well. But I also would be remiss to say that I think that some decks, it just has like a really big learning curve to how to play Dofi correctly. But also Dofi has like, I think the highest ceiling, but the most variance right now. You really are kind of, if you keep seeing your Jinbeis with your Weevils, you just like never feel like you're losing. It's just very strong. Even if you have like Rob Lucci with their constant removal, it's very tough to kind of keep up with how much aggression they can get out of here. So I do think Dofi in a vacuum is a deck that will have the highest chance of winning, in the sense that it has the highest high ceiling compared to decks right now, but it also has a good amount of variance because of how quick you need to see your stuff, and or how like your best play compares to like your second best play. So then we've got Rob Lucci, which is like only held back by Black Yo Luffy being held in the meta as much as it is, right? Obviously, most matchups are winning, or if not even right now, too. Nami is kind of taking a bit of a back step because of its just horrendous win rate into Dofi as well, which is very popular. 75-25 is pretty tough for Nami, and one of the reasons I think it can be kind of portrayed as not in this meta as much. We got Black Yo Luffy, which similarly just dislikes the fact that Bonnie is in the meta. I do think like the yellow Anel can be really tricky, since they can play a lot of bodies that are tall and then have a hard time losing in the end game. And there's also purple Luffy, which I don't think purple Luffy's as around as we thought it would be, but being able to be very aggressive, especially with the Luffy Taro, can be pretty tough for you. But the fact that you are doing well into Rob Lucci and seems like you have the advantage into Doflamingo, I don't think it's an unwinnable matchup. I think it's pretty close, but I would probably give the edge to Black Yo Luffy at this current point based on what I've seen in the matchup. So, but definitely something like if Dofi sees like they're putting at a really good time, or if they bottom deck your only copy of Sabu that you found, Dofi can definitely take advantage of you not finding your pieces quick enough, which is very tough for the deck. Anel, which I've mentioned before, I think I was completely wrong about how relevant I thought this deck was going to be. I didn't think it was going to be around, and I was definitely wrong about that one. It does have a good matchup in the Doflamingo. It would be I'm personally surprised about the matchup into Rob Lucci being evenish at 48.9. You just see this matchup, and every time, Rob Lucci plays another Ice Age, right? Like, Ice Age Moria just punishes what Anel wants to do so horrendously. It's very tough for Anel based on my own testing. We also have Bonnie, which is, I would believe this one's a little bit more evenish, right? Purple Luffy's a little bit tough for you, and then just kind of the rest. And then obviously your horrendous matchup is the copy of Nami here. I also think like Star Deck 14 Luffy just wasn't really around enough for some of this. So these three matchups, right, are definitely not around as much as they were. Only 2 Nami topped, no Star Deck 14s topped, and no Reiju's topped from this past weekend. So, and now it's kind of in the clear for some of its really horrendous matchups. And then Marco, I think people are testing it out, but it's not like a full force card or deck right now. So I do think that's something that's kind of impactful for the deck. But I think it's going to be around a bit because it does have some really evenish matchups across the top 5, right? Like, look at this, like, top 5 matchups, right? It's super good, right? 65 or 66, 49, 54, 50, and then 47. So again, I do think this is like closer to like 45, maybe even like 40 on a bad day. But from the numbers, that's kind of what we're seeing. And then Bonnie's kind of like in the same way. It is kind of just definitely having a bad Rob Lucci matchup at 38%, but otherwise everything is moderately winnable. You do get to be pretty good into one of the top 3, and then also pretty mid against the Doflamingo as well. So I think that's good. Something also I've mentioned, I haven't really mentioned this, but I was doing the commentary for San Diego, and I saw a lot of this top 32, and I was really engaged with specifically the tournament because I was part of the staff essentially. And I noticed that this format in comparison to other matchups are really, really polarizing. We had a lot of, day 2 was top 32 with best of 3. And a lot of matches that I saw were either mirror matches that went to game 3, or they were just one-sided almost immediately. So I do think it's a little bit trickier to find like a grindier, like evenish matchup in this. Most of these decks, like one deck kind of gets like the early advantage and just kind of takes off with it, which is not always how I've seen this game, but I do see it a little bit more in this one as well. So other than that, we just kind of have the rest of them. I do think that like Smoker seems to be doing good, but again, once we get kind of like underneath the top 5, I would say that these bottom 5 are a little bit less reliable for their numbers, just because they weren't as present as I'd say the 5 above it too. So anyways, that's the matchup chart. You can check it out yourself, and you can also check out more details if you have the Patreon with TCG Matchmaking. And we're just going to go over the top placing list for each one of these. So these are the highest win rates on the ladder, and I think there's like a minimum game count too. It's not just you played a game and you won with it, but more so just consistently winning more often than others as well. So we're just going to kind of shotgun through these really quickly. Nothing too insightful, but we're just going to go down the line. So for Smoker, this is a pretty actually interesting list. We did get a top 32 with the San Diego with Smoker, and it didn't look anywhere near like kind of half like this, but the top end was radically different in the fact that or the top end from what my experience is. So most people I see are playing Isho, but we do see Jack in this deck, which does make sense when we're a leader that can give like the Dawn to the leader and then get the reduction with Jack or into Jack, so get rid of a 4 cost. I think 4 cost removal is really important in this meta with Doflamingo around, so that is impactful. We also have the Sabo too, so this is a secret rare from OP07. I don't see this card as much, but definitely a great target to play if you are playing into a Doflamingo meta. You get rid of 2 of their bodies, which is great. I know Perona's been playing this deck a lot, or this card in their deck. Not that Perona's been seeing a lot of play in itself, but they would love to play this against Doflamingo for that double removal too. So I think that's like a good tech choice. The rest of the deck, I think, is generally how we've seen it. Tashiki's obviously really good for this deck. We play Brook as well, and just the rest of our like Navy cards and just a cost reduction too. So I think Smoker's in a good spot. Essentially, I do think Rob Lucci's just better in a vacuum though, but there are some like kind of polarizing matchups where this one can just be better. Or just the fact that you can interact with Black Yellow Luffy. You can see too, like that matchup's like a little bit better for us, which is pretty good. Not super good, right? It's probably like a solid -1, but it's not like the -4 or 5 that Rob Lucci's kind of toting for it. So I think that is something impactful for it, but obviously Rob Lucci is quite the terror and definitely can abuse 8-drop Moria, I think, better than other mono black decks too. But here's their the Smoker list, and then Anel as well. I think we kind of know what these look like about now. We kind of lean on the reduction, or sorry, the removal cards of like Gadatsu, still great, especially since a lot of decks are at 5 life right now. You can even like ping them once, you can leave them at 4. Gadatsu gets rid of a 4 cost or a 5 cost if you want to leave them at 5. Luffy also gets removal. It's a little bit more conditional, but you also can like attack with it after the turn you play it, and then like pop something, so you can kind of do like a 2-for-1. Nami's been fantastic too, being able to use this to get rid of 5 costs consistently. You have to go like -1 in hand size, but if you're trying to play around putting anyways, that's pretty good for you, and like half your decks or half your deck is like trigger cards. So other than that, we know the top end cards is Katakuri, Enel, Yamato, and 10-drop Ace, and it's just trying to stick as many of those on the board as efficiently as you can, and if you can kind of blow out a lot of decks at the end. So it's definitely, can keep up with Doflamingo. Yamato is such a good removal card. Being able to heal and remove a 4-drop is super good, and then also the 7-drop Enel can get some pressure too. So I think this deck is in a good spot right now. Definitely weird how this deck got literally nothing new, but the format after the Star decks came out definitely shines better for it, and it's in a pretty good spot. So here's Enel. All right, next up we've got Bonnie. Bonnie definitely kind of shifted to what we're seeing with this new meta, and the biggest card is Carrot. I feel like I've said it like 100 times, but Carrot's just super good at being able to stun Doflamingo stuff and many other things too, so that does help the deck a lot, and just the fact it's another green 5 cost. Most people I've seen are taken out of Zoro as well as Rosinante, so it's clear in this build too that's the case. Most people are also on the double searches of the Baby 5 as well as the Bonnie. And then like the tech little ad that I see from this one is a 3-cost part. So your turn, so it's not your opponent's turn, unfortunately, but if a character is rested from your own effects, you get to draw one and then trash one. So that comes up every once in a while, and I think that is kind of impactful too. But in general, I think this deck is fine. I've seen a lot of people jump down to 3 copies of Hawkins, which is interesting. That has kind of just been like a collective hive mind of people just unsleeving 1 copy of it, but I understand with how the kind of meta works, and the fact that like Ice Age Jack can really remove this in Rob Lucci in a way that it wasn't able to previously, I think comes up as well. So but here's the build from Bonnie. I think the deck is still in a good spot, and it definitely appreciates the meta outside of, I think, Rob Lucci being as present as it is. So here's the Bonnie list. All right, next up you got Luffy, and this one's a really interesting build. I've seen most cards that have gone in this deck for the last like 3 months. There haven't been a lot of tech cards that I've been seeing more lately, but one that I have seen now is this 3-drop Nami. So this is from the Star Deck 14 deck, and it has blocker, and then also on play, if you have 6 or less cards in your hand and a character with a cost of 8 or more, you get to draw a card. So I've been told that people play this off of their Moria as like a value play. I've been seeing a lot of people play like Emporio as well, using that to be able to kind of set up like 7K leader with 1 life, and then being able to transition to a 9K leader with 1 life on the next turn. So I've been seeing a little bit more of that, but Nami's fine. It's a blocker. It's a draw card, right? If you're able to Nami and Sabo, that's just like better, right? Like you're able to be a 7K leader with 1 life, which is better in some scenarios, establish 2 blockers, and then also draw a card, because Moria's an 8 cost that can play this Nami. So it just seems naturally good. So, maybe like Rebecca's better too, though. Like you can like get the card draw from your trash, but I like what the Nami kind of shows as like a value play, and that's interesting for it. So other than that, kind of what we've been seeing, it's a decision if you want to play Ace or not, how much removal you want to, and then the rest of the deck is pretty self-explanatory in my mind. So that's a cool little ad, and fun to see it here. And here's the Black Yellow Luffy, and then Dofi. Dofi, I know like there's kind of like a different mindset depending on who you ask on how low to the ground do you go versus how high to the ground you go. I personally like 10-drop Kaido in my own builds. I think that helps out round some rougher matchups. I also like Jozu, specifically for Black Yellow Luffy. I think that can help that matchup go into your favor. And really any deck that's not Rob Lucci, I think Jozu just helps you out a whole lot, even in that matchup, right? In fact, you can play Jozu to use its effect to get rid of Sabo. Like, it's a way around it while also being able to just establish a body on board. So obviously we have cards like Red Rock as well as cards like Raging Tiger, but not being able to use them in like established, like you have to give up playing cards that turn to remove something on your opponent's turn. And if you're a Rob Lucci player, you realize that, I can play a card and remove a card at the same time, right? I get to establish a board and destroy yours. So it's tough to find time for these two when your opponent's board just going to get larger again on the next turn. So, but Dofi is really great. I do think those are like the only two cards that I've seen more often played that aren't in this build. But this is a super quick build, very low to the ground, and then you just establish your board, and when you do, you can use Gravity Blade and Red Rock to just decimate anything they have while still getting in your 5 and 6Ks as you do it. So super strong deck. I don't expect anything less from it right now, and there you go. All right, Rob Lucci. This one, I think there's been some kind of newer techs being added, or like older techs as well, that I definitely see in this build that they've provided. Biggest one I've been seeing pop up is the 2-drop Uta. So this is just kind of like a replacement for our Ennis Lobby stage missing. So this can't be KO'd in battle by your leaders, and then activate main, you can rest this character, give it to one of your opponent's characters -2 cost during this turn. So you could use this in conjunction of a lot of other effects. You can also like do some silly stuff where you can play it active off of your Moria, and then you just rest it afterwards to get the minus cost, which then would still be work well with your Jack that you maybe played last turn. Hardest issue is maybe putting it into your trash, but we've got stuff like Sabo. We've got 6 King Pistol as well as our leader effect that can get it in there as well. Kaku's gotten a bit of a re-emergence here because it is really good at getting rid of 4 costs in conjunction with our leader's -1 reduction. And then the rest of the deck I think is understood. We have like the 1 copy of Brook, which is fine. It does help us get around a lot of good like blockers with protection, mostly Sabo, which we're also running. But we kind of know what Lucci looks like. Again, besides like the new kind of Uta tech and adjustments that we've been forced to add due to Dofi being present, it's still kind of the same deck that we've been seeing. So there it is there. All right, next up we've got Starter Deck 14 Luffy. I think this deck could probably do well. It's just really overshadowed by one, how good Rob Lucci is, because our Moria plays are a little bit tougher to set up, and when we do set it up, they're not as good. But then also the fact that what was thought to be maybe cost reduction to counter Lucci, it's still not like super easy, right? Like we can even look at the matchups chart, right? And we have a pretty good matchup into Starter Deck 14 Luffy, because the extra cost that we get to our cards just isn't enough against Lucci. Like you counter like other decks weirdly. For example, like if you have a Dawn underneath your leader and Rebecca, Rocket Luffy can't pop this Rebecca, which is actually kind of dire for Black Yellow Luffy at times. But Rob Lucci doesn't really care. It just reduces the cost of everything, and it makes you cry. So I think the deck is still good. A lot of people were talking about Hina, mostly me, being added to this build to, we're already playing the brand new, the Navy stuff. It becomes like an 8K, but it looks like people who are playing Starter Deck Luffy just still aren't playing it. They're like, it's not worth it being a non-counter and everything else. We'd rather just play the more consistent cards, which if it works for you, I understand that. So with these builds though, I probably wouldn't be sleeving this one up. I do think that Starter Deck 14 Luffy in this is good. It does get some wins, but you're just probably better off playing either Smoker or Lucci in a competitive sense, on my own opinion. So don't let me deter you, though. That's kind of just my own opinion on it. And if you've got a lot of faith in Starter Deck 14 Luffy, you should definitely carry that out. Don't let me stop you. So next is Katakuri. I will definitely not sleeve up this deck, but I know people love it a lot. It's been around for quite a while from OP03. We do have a couple new toys of the Egghead cards of the Bonnie, as well as the Nami, which we've kind of talked about the Nami. And that's really it, right? Which is really interesting. We do have this tech, though, of the Rayquaza. If your life is at 2 or less, you get to get a plus 3k during this battle, but also trigger, you get to play up to 1 cost 5 or lower Egghead type character from your trash. So this isn't leader locked, which I think is interesting. So you could use this for being able to play out your Bonnie, your Luffy, or your Nami. Also, Frankie is an Egghead card. So all of these are very good. Some of them have on-play effects, some don't, but being able to have kind of a way to just have another trigger off your life to be able to play another body out for free, right? So that's kind of nice. It is a card without any counter, which kind of stinks, and none of these cards have any counter with it. This Nami you could play it, and then you can use its trigger and then its effect to cycle a card if you have 3 or less. But generally, it's an interesting ad, but I can see why you would play it, which is cool. So we do just, again, have like a lot of non-counter cards. We've got Flame Split, which is great for kind of going for game, and shown is just like a better copy of Amaru, even though like we don't get like the extra plus 1k. This card being able to interact with more things and be more defensive too. I think more people are just kind of preferring this one. So even though like the trigger is either better or worse than Aandroidd at different times. So other than that, I think this deck is pretty straightforward. You just try to be as tempo oriented, put a lot of pressure down, and the biggest thing from this build is more of the Egghead part. So we're not finding any of the big mom stuff, we're not finding any of the like Paros Barrows or anything, which I think is interesting. So maybe I'll have to try out like this Egghead version of it. It looks interesting, but we'll see what that looks like. But there's Katakuri. All right, Nami, this one, I don't want to just be reductive, but we know what Nami looks like. People have been playing this for a while. Some people only play this deck. We got some new cards in OP07, and they're still really great. You do have a really hard matchup into a lot of like the black-yellow, not black-yellow, but the blue Dofi. I think that's really tough for Nami. And any really just kind of faster or aggressive decks, so like purple Luffy. But that purple Luffy's not as around as much, but I can almost guarantee for the rest of this format, Dofi's going to be 20 to 25% of any room. So having to like a 1 in 4 lose, every round for 10 rounds, knowing that Dofi will get more, likely more seen as later you go on, it's going to be you'd have to be pretty bold to either sleeve up Nami or really know a way to kind of counter the Dofi matchup. So I think this is just, again, standard. There are some like little tech choices for it, but I think Nami will top like a little bit this format, but not as much as it was kind of in the OP07. But there you go. And then to finish it off, we do have Purple Luffy. On release, or like this time a month ago, I was really liking this deck. I think there's a lot of great cards that Purple gets in general, not just this leader. But then I think just Dofi's better, right? I think that's just kind of understood when it comes to just playing bodies on board. We get some like taller ones, but it's like a little bit less flexible. If you don't see your Luffy Taro on curve, and kind of like you need to see 2 of them on curve. If you don't do that, you just kind of lose. Dofi just gets better tempo. They just play better cards out at times, and they're more aggressive, and they don't have to take cards out of their life to do what they need to do, right? But there are some matchups that you do like playing Purple Luffy into. You do have a lot of great cards like the Useless Captain Kid, the Lin as well that came out of OP08, and the Kaido's always been a staple in this one too. So I think the deck is still viable. We're going to see a lot more of it, I think, in OP09 with the kind of like additional support the deck gets too. But it's in a weird spot, but it definitely can still get its own wins. The biggest thing I've also noticed is that it's not running Magellan, which I think, based on what I've been seeing from this past weekend, is probably a staple for the deck. It just helps you against every deck that's not Dofi, where most decks want to get to a specific Dawn count to really start playing the game and to delay that a turn, as well as have like a 5-6 body that your opponent's either going to have to just 2k out of for the rest of the game, or like lose 2 Dawn, I think it's generally worth it too. So anyways, here's the purple Luffy build. I expect to see it, you know, do well-ish. It's probably the 6th best deck in the format right now, but it's definitely gonna have some hard matchups too. So anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I appreciate you guys hanging out and just watching this to the end. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, because I do appreciate that as well. And if you want any data for any of these weeks, including this week, last week, the week before that, you get the point. You can find that out on my website, Eggman Events. And again, thank you to TCG Matchmaking for collecting and publishing this data too. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.